welcome to our second commencement address for class of 2020. We are really grateful to have Shereen Bhan with us for this address, and thanks Shereen for taking time out for this. Shereen needs no introduction, but we are really eager to learn from her years of experience in journalism, tracking corporate and policy news, as well as anchoring some really fantastic shows in her career, and particularly the fact that most of you will be young PR professionals very soon. I think we stand to gain a lot from Shereen's advice to you on how to be excellent at your job. So Shereen, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this gathering today. And I believe there's 20 of you and 17 women, so more power to all of you. And I hope that you go on to do great things in life. I don't want to make this long drawn. I would prefer to keep this as interactive as possible. Let me start by saying that I've now been doing this for the last 19 years, and I think you need to get your principles right. And I think what is very clear in my mind is that over the last 19 years of tracking business, of tracking policy news, of meeting entrepreneurs, young and old, what I've been able to sort of come up with is a matrix which helps in good times, in bad times, in volatile times, and we're clearly in volatile times currently. I think to start with, and as PR professionals, I would hope that you take this very seriously. You have to be absolutely clear about what your message is. What do you stand for? Who are you trying to address? What do you want to say? I think clarity of communication is absolutely essential. Very often, when I reach out to CEOs, or I reach out to professional managers, and you try and ask them that what is it that you do? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? If they're not able to give you a succinct answer in a minute that is understandable by me, my grandmother, my father, you lose your audience. I think it's very important, and this is something that many CEOs who I admire and respect taught me, is that your pitch has to be so clear that even my grandmother should be able to understand that. So I think clarity of communication is essential. I think one of the other things that we don't focus enough on, and I think that we need to emphasize that a lot more, especially in the way that we communicate, not this hyperbole of the best in the world and so on and so forth. And that's a statement of fact for a company to make. But in our communication, I think what we need to focus much more on is what makes it different. What makes the product or the service different? How does it stand apart from its competition? What is the competition? What are the key attributes that help it find a niche for itself in the marketplace? And again, when I see communication that comes our way, there isn't enough emphasis on that, and I think that's absolutely essential. I think as PR professionals, one thing that we live in volatile times, and I think that's going to be critical as well. And this is something that Mr. Murthy taught me very early on, and he said that let the good news take the stairs and let the bad news take the elevator. So look, times are tough. Companies will see up cycles and down cycles, but you shouldn't be in a situation where you only communicate the good news and you try and hide behind the bad news. You have to come out and disclose. You have to be transparent about what's gone wrong, why, and so on and so forth. And I think if you're going to be part of teams that helps design communication strategy, I think this is going to have to be something that you must focus on as well. That when things are good, it's companies want to talk and people want to communicate, but when things are bad, don't go into the shell. Come out there, be transparent, and put out a clear message, both internally within the organization as well as externally for the rest of the world to see. I think knowing the product or the service is absolutely critical. I can't tell you the number of times I get called, and I still get called at least 30, 40 times, in a day by various PR professionals. And they will go into a long spiel about, this is the entrepreneur, or this is the company and this is the business, without actually giving me what the real is of that individual or that announcement or the company. So, you have to be very clear about what exactly you want to communicate. And I don't think we see that happen enough. And I think basic hygiene, stuff is not adhered to in any form or fashion. I will get calls still, in fact, this morning as well, saying, are you still with CNBC? What beats do you track? And so on and so forth. I mean, that is just, it's not, I'm not saying that they should know who I am, but I'm saying that if you are making a call to somebody, then you should at least have done your basic homework on who you're reaching out to, why you're reaching out to that particular individual, and then have your messaging ready for that particular individual. So I think, I can't stress enough need for preparation, the need for homework. I mean, I'll give you my own example. I've been doing this 19 years, but there is not a day that I go into the studio without having done my homework on who the guest that I'm going to be speaking with is, when I don't have a sort of lineup of the issues that I want to take up, the questions that I want to address, and so on and so forth. So I think it's very, very crucial that you go in there with preparation, and you go in there with a very clear message on what you want to say and how you want to say it. I think, again, it comes down to the choices that each one of us have to make as professionals. And these are hard choices, but I have firmly believed, and I continue to maintain that if you're clear about your purpose, you're passionate about what you do, and you put in the time. I mean, there is no substitute for putting in the time. You just have to ensure that you are diligent, that you're consistent, that you show up and you're reliable and you're dependable. I think inconsistency is one of the biggest flaws that we should be mindful of if you are in this to make a career and you're in this for the marathon. Because people don't like to deal with inconsistency. If I have to deal with somebody, I want to know that, if I've given a job, it's gotten done and it'll be done effectively. So I think that's something that we must be very mindful of, that, whatever we decide to do, there is a consistency in how we approach it. I think the other thing that I think is very important, especially in our line of work, which is really people oriented, is teamwork. I I have an immense amount of regard and respect for the people that I work with. You may not see them on TV, and I may walk away with all the fame and the glory, but there is a whole army of people that does a lot of work behind me. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. And it's important to acknowledge these relationships. It's important to acknowledge the style of functioning, so that you are all working towards a common goal, that you're all working towards a shared goal. And I think that's crucial, because very often within organizations, and especially large organizations, a lot can get lost in translation, a lot can get lost in silos. And I think it's important to build that internal communication as well, and to ensure that there is teamwork, to ensure that everyone is moving in one direction. I think alignment is critical. If you look at, large companies that have continued to do well and have stood the test of time, one of the things that you will find pretty much across each one of them is that they are aligned, that their front end is aligned with their back end. And I think that is crucial. And that is something, as professionals who are going out there to shape and design effective communication strategies, that's certainly something that you should be looking at. The ability to be able to take people along, the ability to be able to create a shared message that resonates with the larger organization and with the stakeholders of that organization. I think that's going to be very, very crucial to do. I think at the end of the day, integrity is everything. And it's personal integrity. It's how you engage and interact with people. It's how you deal with them in terms of mutual respect and understanding and empathy and fairness. And hopefully you will all go on to becoming leaders in your own right at some point. But those are the fundamentals on which you build a long-lasting career. If you want to be treated fairly, if you want people to show you empathy and respect, then you have to ensure that you do exactly that. That you deal with people in exactly the same way. And if each one of us does our bit, I think we will create a culture of confidence, we'll create a culture of trust, and we will create a culture that's collaborative. And I think, very often I hear people say that in companies where there is a lack of collaboration and a lack of communication, you will see problems and you will see friction. And I think it's very important that we create this culture of collaboration, cooperation, and communication that will work well for individuals within that organization and for the organization as a whole in general. Um, you know, we have to also constantly look at reinventing ourselves. I have made many pivots in my career, and every time these pivots were driven um, by opportunities that came my way, but also challenges that came my way. I'll go back to an example of around 2006 or so, when CNBC was moving from Delhi to Bombay, and our headquarters were going to move to Bombay. And we were basically told that that's going to be the move. And I was anchoring the primetime market shows on CNBC at that point in time. And I just felt that Delhi is my home. I'm not really ready to move to Bombay. I've always been interested in policy and politics as well. And I just felt that, I'm going to continue to stay on in Delhi. And that was a choice that I made. And it's not that there wasn't anxiety or nervousness about what this would mean for my career. Will this be a setback for me? I could have sort of wallowed in self-pity, but I chose at that point in time to focus much more sharply on building myself in tracking policy, in creating shows around politics, and of course young entrepreneurs, which is Young Turks, and that has of course been my passion project for the last 19 years. But so that was a situation where I could have chosen to say, okay, this is a setback, I'm not going to recover from it. Or I could have reinvented myself. So there will be points in your life where you are going to have to make choices, and hopefully make choices that work for you in the long term. But even if they don't, you have the opportunity, or you should in your mind know that you have the ability to be able to reinvent yourself. And that is something that you need to be conscious of. You need to be conscious of the fact that versatility helps. That being open and flexible helps. And those are things that, if I share my personal experiences, have worked very well for me. I've always said yes to things that have come my way. They could have been very different from what I was doing, but it's given me the opportunity to learn. And I think that's important. The fact that we continue to engage with people from different walks of life, people who will share their ideas and their thoughts with us, as opposed to coming from a place of complacency and a feeling that we know it all and we don't need to know any more, or we don't need to learn anymore. I think the ability to nurture an attitude that encourages learning, I think that is very critical, and I enjoy that. I learn from our young reporters who teach me about tech and all kinds of other stuff, and I learn from colleagues, and I learn from people that I've interviewed, and it just gives you a much wider and broader and deeper lens with which to view the world. One of the other lessons that I've learned in my career is not to have predetermined ideas or notions about what somebody and what an individual is or what a company is. I think you have to go through the exercise of unlearning, unraveling, getting to know. There has to be that curiosity. So whenever I walk into an interview, I don't walk into the interview with an agenda of, this is the 10 questions that I want an answer to, because then you lose the ability to listen and you lose the ability to react, you lose the ability to respond. So if you go in there with your mind made up that these are the 10 things that I want from this interview, you probably get a decent interview, but you may not necessarily get the best interview because you were not listening to what the other person had to offer. So I think it's important to create a space where you don't lose the ability to listen, and you don't lose the ability to respond and be spontaneous. And in this business, I think, spontaneity can create magical moments. I've had that happen to me many times during the course of my career. I'll share one example. I mean, uh, it was a crazy situation, but it was fairly early on in my career, and I was interviewing Richard Branson, and we all know Richard Branson, and he's sort of this larger than life man. And we were shooting early morning. I still remember distinctly at the Hyatt in Delhi, and we were doing a walkabout out next to the pool area. And we did an interview. It was a fun conversation, and we were wrapping things up. And I extended my hand to say thank you for the interview. And the next thing that I know, he almost like picked me up and threw me into the swimming pool. Now you have to have your wits about you all the time, and you have to have the ability to react to the situation, and handle the situation and deal with it and cope with it. And the ability to think on your feet, I think that is crucial. And just common sense. I mean, I think more than intellectualizing everything, I think just good old common sense to tell you to see the red flags in a situation, to ensure that there are adequate safeguards in the manner in which you're putting together a communication strategy or dealing with people. I think those are things that you need to be mindful of. And this is, you often think that this is the obvious stuff, but very often it's the obvious stuff that you take for granted and hence ignore. So it's important that you sort of, keep these things in mind as you go along. Since there's so many of you young women who are going to be joining this business, as I've said previously in the past as well, I've always been very, very cautious about speaking up for women, so to speak, because I've always felt that, look, I come from a place of privilege and immense privilege. I mean, I grew up in a home where my parents didn't treat me as a girl, and my choices were not dictated by these are your limitations and these are your constraints and these are the things you can do. And we were never raised like that. So I've been fortunate to have been able to make my choices pretty much the way that I wanted from the time that I was a child, including making this choice of getting into journalism. But there are millions of women in this country and globally as well who don't have the ability to exercise that choice. And so I think it's incumbent on each one of us to encourage, to support, to stand up for women, because it's not easy, and we don't know the backstory of a lot of women who are trying very hard to be able to move forward and forge their own paths and create their own futures. So I think as a leader who also happens to be a woman, I take this very seriously. So to give you an example, at CNBC, and that's not by design that we only wanted women in leadership roles or anything like that, but we're a merit-based organization, and so a lot of our leaders happen to be women. And I think the reason for that is that we've allowed a culture of a meritocracy to flourish, and we've created a culture that values women and that values the fact that women will have to make choices that will require them to take time off, whether that is because of maternity and so on and so forth. But we've created that culture where we say that we want you to return and we want you to be, we think you're an asset to the organization. The organization will stand by you through whatever it is that needs to be done. So it's not that we're doing that only for the women and we're not doing that for the men. We do that for the men as well. I mean, if we encourage the men to attend parent-teacher meetings, and if they need time off to deal with education related to their kids and so on and so forth. But I'm saying specifically for the women, we have been very clear about the fact that we want to keep the attrition low, especially in that period where the maternity leave often forces women to opt out. And I'm really, really happy to say that we've not lost our female colleagues. Most of them have gone on to their maternity leave. They've returned, they've gone back again. Many, in fact, today are now on their second maternity leave, and they're continuing to be a part of the organization, and they've continued to grow in their roles, and they've continued to rise in the ranks. And so I think it's important that women also understand that if you have to, and I've faced this myself personally as well during the start of my career, and for almost a decade, where I would be almost apologetic to speak up for myself. I would be almost apologetic about asking for something for myself, and I think it's important that women don't internalize that. You don't have to be you don't have to think that it holds you back in any way. Be clear with the organization about what you feel is what you rightfully deserve, and be clear about your aspiration. Be clear about what you are keen to do, how much more you can contribute. So I think that transparent communication and engagement with the organization is something that we should all encourage, and we should all take forward, because that just makes it easier. Not always, but it certainly makes it easier for us as individuals to make the right choices, whether we want to stay in an organization or not, whether we want to continue to work in a line of work or not. And I think that is certainly something that I would encourage each one of you to do. If there's something that I could change about the way that I was operating, that's certainly something that I would like to change. So, at the end of the day, I would just say that, I often hear people complaining about going to work, and complaining about how long the day is and so on and so forth. I've been doing this 19 years. I am here for between 10 to 12 hours, if not longer, every single day. I've been here through the lockdown every single day in office. There has been no work from home for me, but I have done that because I believe as a leader, it's important that there is a clear communication to the organization and to your team that I'm there in the trenches with you. I'm not going to be sitting back in my room and expect at home and expect the rest of you to go out there. You need, as leaders, you need to lead. You need to show the way. You need to show the path, and you need to stand together with your team. And I think that's very, very crucial. And you just need to love what you do. Do I love everything that I do today? No, it's hard after 20 years to love every single aspect of what I do. But in large parts I do, and I think that's what makes it a career, that you invest in yourself, you invest in your learning, you invest in making pivots and reinventing yourself and acquiring new skills. And I think that really is at the heart of building a career. And I keep saying that because please remember, the way that you approach life and the way that you approach your profession, if this is going to be a 100-meter dash or a sprint, is very different from wanting to do this for the next 10, 15 years. So I think the choices that you make today will be defined by whether this is a career for you. It's a lifelong passion. It's a commitment. It requires that kind of commitment. So I hope that you will all make that commitment, not just to yourselves, but to the organizations that you work with. And the other thing that I would say, which I have learned, and I think it's important to you may leave organizations and you may move on and you may work with different people and move on. But I think it's important that that you respect the organization and the people that you work with. And you may have a different point of view, or you may have differences of opinion, but unless and until it's absolutely necessary or it's something very significant, I would suggest that it's best to sort of to maintain that respect for a place that may have taught you something, a place or people that may have helped you grow and evolve. And sometimes things don't work out, and so be it. But I think maintaining that respect, at least that is something that I've always lived with and lived by. So those are some of my thoughts and ideas on how I've done things, and I hope that it helps you as you start your journey and innings. And I'm happy to sort of take questions and engage with you guys on whatever you would like to know.
And once again, formally thank you for taking time out for this address to our outgoing class of 2020. We hope to catch up with you sometime later, personally, if possible.
Hopefully in person.
Yes. But thanks so much. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. I wish you all the very best of luck, and I hope that you do well in whatever it is that you decide to do. Thank you so much for having me today.